Clark and Stephanie White definitely had a situation where they was in a heated exchange right before halftime. Guys, for this one here, we got to go all the way up to Indy. Let's get it.
Caitlin Clark had had enough of the mayhem. And everything changed at halftime when she finally confronted Coach Stephanie White.
The street is that Caitlin Clark and Stephanie White exchanged words going into halftime of this Atlanta Dream game. Now, I'm here to tell you, no footage has emerged of the altercation, but I'm pretty sure within a couple hours it's going to be roaming somewhere out there that this exchange happened.
Against Atlanta, the Fever totally changed the course of events. However, what transpired during that contentious conversation? And why did certain teammates start acting as though they genuinely wanted to win? You may be surprised by the truth. What do you believe Caitlin and Coach White actually discussed during halftime? I'll explain this to you, because it wasn't just another basketball game that took place in Indianapolis. It was a lesson in how one individual, who has finally had enough of the absurdity, can totally change the vibe of an entire brand.
What you got there?
This is what we know took place. As they made their way to the locker room at halftime, Caitlin Clark and Stephanie White got into a heated argument. According to sources at the game, I'm talking about several people who were there, not just some haphazard conjecture on Twitter. Let me explain why this makes perfect sense before you roll your eyes and assume it's just another online myth. There are rumors that CeCe urged her coach to sideline Natasha Howard and Kelsey Mitchell because they just don't pass the ball. To be honest, I'm happy for her. For anyone who truly understands basketball, what we've been witnessing this season has been excruciating, so someone had to say it.
Caitlin Clark and Stephanie White were having a heated discussion at halftime. Word in the street is Caitlin Clark told White to sit Kelsey Mitchell and Howard because they don't pass. Could be true. Caitlin went to tie her shoe. Like, that is something that I noticed. Like, Caitlin literally, when Natasha Howard had the ball, she didn't even look. She was basically walking back on defense. She essentially walked back on defense every time Natasha Howard had the ball.
It didn't happen in a vacuum. So, let's discuss what brought us to this point. Caitlin Clark is not an uncontrollably explosive hothead. She has been handling a motion offense that is completely incompatible with her skill set. Observing how teammates routinely overlook her when she's playing in a system that appears to be intended to reduce rather than increase her effect. The most striking thing was that everything changed following that halftime talk. In the second half, the Fever scored more than they had in years, outscoring Atlanta 59-40. Coincidence? Not in my opinion. However, this is the part of the problem that truly irritates me. In a video that has been making the rounds, teammates are questioned about their emergency contacts. Who would they call if they were in difficulty, you know? And you know whose name is never brought up? Yes, Caitlin Clark's. Each and every teammate names another person. Each and every one. I'm not claiming that this proves anything, but when you take into account what is purported to have occurred at halftime, the timing is very intriguing. It's like watching a piece come together, and team chemistry doesn't look good. The contrast is striking, so let's look at what really changed in the second half. We witnessed the same old issues throughout the first half. With 3 seconds remaining on the shot clock, Caitlin gets the ball. Even when she was in a better position, her teammates ignored her, and this excruciating ISO ball made things worse for everyone. However, the ball started to move after halftime. Caitlin was suddenly receiving early possession touches. Players were no longer only hunting their own shots. Instead, they were genuinely trying to pass.
Win for you guys. What was working for you so well, especially in that second half offensively?
Yeah, I mean, I thought we just played with a really great pace. I thought we moved the ball. I thought we cut hard, which opened up the three-point line for us, and then we knocked down some shots, but also I thought our defense was really good. So I think it was both sides of the ball, and kind of felt like how 2 years now.
It was like witnessing an entirely different team. And you know what's actually telling? Despite frequently making dubious choices, Natasha Howard, who had been receiving a lot of playing time, was unexpectedly benched for the majority of the fourth quarter. When it counted most, Kelsey Mitchell, who had 22 points coming into the final stanza, hardly touched the court. Let's be honest, albeit some may argue that these are just typical coaching modifications. It's not a coincidence when you've been giving some players a lot of playing time throughout the season, regardless of their decision-making, and then you're benching them immediately following a contentious halftime debate over ball movement. That is the result.
Caitlin Clark was going to obviously have words with Stephanie White. We noted that she's been running this motion offense, and Caitlin Clark cannot get in the rhythm. A lot of people thinking Caitlin Clark hurt. I don't believe she's hurt. I believe Caitlin Clark cannot simply get into rhythm. That's why she has not been shooting very well. And I was one of the first people to tell y'all this was going to happen. Told y'all about a week ago, Caitlin Clark was going to come back, and if nothing is going to change, we're going to see the same Caitlin Clark we seen right before injury. And sure enough, this is the same Caitlin Clark we seen right before injury.
We've all been witnessing this dysfunction for months, which is the most annoying aspect of the entire scenario. In the professionals, Caitlin Clark struggled with her shot after being the most productive player in college basketball. And everyone wants to point the finger at her growth or league adjustment. Here's the problem, though. When you pay close attention to the games, you see a player who is always battling a system that doesn't make the most of her. Consider it. Caitlin had the ball in her hands, was able to accelerate, and improved everyone around her when she was in college. She is required to stand in corners while other players dribble the ball's air in the professional ranks. She is anticipated to perform magic while receiving passes with 2 seconds remaining on the shot clock. It is not player development. Organizational malpractice is what that is.
Just 4 threes in your last 7 games, but tonight 4 of 5. What got you into the groove tonight in this game?
You certainly did something.
The unfortunate thing is that the outcomes speak for themselves when they let her play her game. Kelsey Mitchell's stunning transformation into Steph Curry prevented that 59-point second half. It occurred because they at last began using their best player like they ought to have been doing all along. This is where things start to become very interesting, though. When Caitlin addressed the media following the game, she was elegant, professional, and supportive of her teammates, praising their ball movement and quick play. However, that interview was really a master tutorial in diplomatic criticism if you know how to read between the lines. She talked about moving the ball and playing at a fast pace, 2 things that had been totally lacking in the first half. She described how the three-point line was made possible by their severe cuts. Once more, something that had not routinely occurred throughout the season. Every compliment was a subtle critique of their performance. The coaching problem is the elephant in the room. I'm not here to disparage Stephanie White specifically. She has earned her place and is obviously a smart basketball mind. However, outstanding athletes and coaches don't always get along. And it's all right. Organizations' refusal to accept that reality is the issue. White's motion offense may be effective with other individuals, but it is obviously ineffective with this combination. It is basketball malpractice to operate a strategy that reduces Caitlin Clark's touches when she has the ability to provide everyone else an advantage simply by holding the ball. Let's take a moment to discuss the supporting cast. Despite being a gifted scorer, Kelsey Mitchell has been expected to perform tasks that don't suit her. Because of Caitlin's playmaking, she has developed into a tough shooter when she should be a spot-up shooter. She is not to blame for that. That is an issue with the system.
When Natasha Howard had the ball, she didn't even look. She was basically walking back on defense. She essentially walked back on defense every time Natasha Howard had the ball. And by the way, if you guys didn't see Natasha Howard...
Although Natasha Howard is a seasoned player who has achieved success in this league, it has been agonizing to watch her constantly make bad choices with the ball as Caitlin remains open. You can learn everything you need to know about this team's bewilderment from the fact that she literally played help defense on her own teammate during one possession. It appears that Caitlin has finally reached her breaking point in a constructive way, which is the most hopeful aspect of the entire issue. She reportedly had an honest discussion about what needs to happen with her coach rather than sulking or requesting a trade. To White's credit, she paid attention and made adjustments. However, this is what worries me moving forward. Months of dysfunction cannot be resolved by one good half. The system, the ball movement, the hierarchy, the fundamental problems. Even if you win one game, those things don't instantly change. Whether they return to the previous patterns, or if this becomes the new normal, will be the true test. Since we've seen glimpses of this team's potential throughout the season, let's be honest. Consistency and dedication to playing correctly have been the issue. And let me clarify something for everyone who wants to make this about drama or personalities. This has nothing to do with Caitlin Clark being challenging or demanding. This is about a system that doesn't know how to make the most of a generational ability that is underutilized. Consider the best point guards in basketball history. Did Magic Johnson's success stem from his tendency to stand in corners? Did Steve Nash's possession of the ball with 3 seconds remaining demonstrate his dominance? Did playing off-ball help Chris Paul become an excellent player? Not, of course. Because their teams developed systems based on their capabilities, they were successful. Rather than developing their system around Caitlin Clark, the Indiana Fever have been attempting to shoehorn her into their system. Not only is that awful basketball, but it's also bad business. You adapt everything else to maximize the influence of a player who has the ability to single-handedly alter the course of your team. What transpired against Atlanta in the second half was a preview of what this squad could become if they dedicate themselves to playing the proper style of play. Caitlin's ball movement, pace, and possession of the ball give everyone else an advantage. Although it's not difficult, everyone must support it. The question now is whether this was a one-time change or the start of a new strategy. If they return to the previous method, you can bet that this won't be the last contentious exchange between the coach and the player. To be honest, I applaud Caitlin Clark for speaking up. Too many gifted athletes simply put up with dysfunction and poor play because they don't want to cause trouble. However, before significant change can occur, someone must occasionally speak up and say, "This isn't working." Everything you need to know about who was correct in the interaction is shown by the fact that they looked better straight away. The results were rather obvious and don't lie. I'm therefore more interested in what the halftime conversation means, even though everyone else is preoccupied with its drama. It symbolizes a player that is so focused on winning that they are willing to engage in challenging dialogue. It shows a readiness to put the success of a team ahead of personal comfort. Most significantly, it offers optimism that this institution may at last be prepared to act morally. Let's now discuss Aliyah Boston amid all of this turmoil, since she has been the ideal illustration of what occurs when players genuinely accept their part in improving Caitlin. Boston's success can be attributed to her realization that her career isn't her top priority. It will be the ideal complement to Caitlin's strengths. When Caitlin has the ball, see how Boston moves without it. She's rolling to the basket, establishing screens, and setting herself up for easy finishes all the time. This team as a whole needs to embrace the idea that she doesn't have to control the ball in order to be effective. Boston's strategy stands in sharp contrast to what we've been witnessing from other players. Boston sees Caitlin as an opportunity multiplier, but some teammates appear to perceive her as competition for touches. That's championship thinking. Speaking of championship mentality, let's talk about this team's priorities. The decisions taken by the front office seem to indicate that they are more focused on upholding their current culture than on making the most of their generational talent. That is outdated thinking that will prevent them from winning. Caitlin Clark is not the kind of player you draft and then expect to adapt to your subpar system. You locate players that enhance your skills and create your system around them. Even if it's really that easy, some individuals seem to find it difficult to grasp. This team dynamic has been troublesome, as evidenced by the emergency contact video I previously highlighted. When teammates don't cite your franchise player as someone they would contact in an emergency, it speaks volumes about the respect and connections inside the company. Here's the problem about respect, though. It is gained by professionalism and output, both of which Caitlin has continuously shown. She's effectively had to demand system adjustments and improved ball movement, which demonstrates how poor the communication has been. Seeing other teams in the league make effective use of their best players while the Fever appear to be ignorant of fundamental basketball ideas is really annoying. Limiting a player's touches isn't the answer when they averaged close to 30 points and 9 assists in college. To make the most of them, the shooting difficulties that are frequently discussed are not occurring in a vacuum. Even excellent shooters will struggle when they are receiving the ball in awkward situations, with little time and without adequate spacing. It isn't a player issue. That is an issue with the system. And let's be honest about this timeline. In just her second season as a professional, Caitlin is already required to instruct her coaches in fundamental basketball tactics. If this organization truly aspires to compete for championships, that is neither natural nor sustainable. Fortunately, the halftime discussion appears to have been a pivotal moment. When a player of Caitlyn's quality raises systemic concerns, astute organizations pay attention and make necessary adjustments. Everything you need to know about the legitimacy of her fears is revealed by the fact that the outcomes were instantaneous. However, the true question is whether this is really a short-term change or a long-term one, because there will undoubtedly be more contentious discussions in the future if they return to the previous methods. There was more to that second half's beauty than just the barrage of goals. The crew as a whole appeared more assured and at ease. Everyone wins when players are aware of their responsibilities and the ball is going correctly. That is the fundamentals of basketball. And I have a question for everyone who wants to berate Caitlyn for speaking up. Which would you prefer, a player who keeps quiet when the team performs poorly, or one who is so focused on winning that they are willing to engage in challenging dialogue? I know which one I would pick. In actuality, players on championship teams hold one another responsible. They have leaders who don't hesitate to confront issues head-on. Leaders do exactly what Caitlyn did at halftime. They recognize issues and try to resolve them. Stephanie White is also coachable, as evidenced by the fact that she seems to listen and make changes. If both parties continue to be transparent about what is and is not working, that is really positive for the partnership's long-term prospects. However, we must not overlook the wider ramifications of this. Teams who don't make the most of their talent will fall behind in the WNBA, a league that is expanding quickly. The Fever cannot afford to squander Caitlyn's prime years learning the fundamentals of offensive strategy. What transpired versus Atlanta was a sneak peek at what this squad could become if they make a constant commitment to playing the correct way. Now, the question is whether the organization is committed to making that kind of play the standard instead of the exception. Because that's ultimately what this is all about. Not confrontation, not drama, not egos. It's about playing winning basketball and making the most of talent. And it's okay if it takes a few contentious conversations to get there. This team may have needed that halftime talk. Perhaps it's time to pay attention when your top player finally raises the apparent issues that everyone has been ignoring. What are your thoughts? Was Caitlyn correct to criticize the system? Please share your opinions below.